So I will give an example of the sort of situation that I encounter and the sorts of things that come up in my mind that are obviously not helpful advice for people in that situation. For instance, I will have some family member come and tell me about their personal problems. Say they're having an issue with their child that's growing up and now is, got a girlfriend or whatever, and now the girlfriend dislikes her, and so she doesn't know how to manage this relationship with her child. And for me, I look at that and it just seems kind of silly because I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the sort of thing to even bother getting worked up about. I mean, it's probably unpleasant, but you just either, I don't know, you should take a few breaths or whatever and you'll be fine. If it really is causing too much trouble, and then just get away from the situation until you're able to have control over your mind in such a situation. But that's not the sort of statement that's helpful for people. If you tell people oh, that's dumb, why are you getting worried about that? That never goes over well. Never, ever, ever goes over well. It doesn't work with Thai people. It does not work with American people. It doesn't work with any people, as far as I'm concerned. It does work with me. When I tell myself that, it works quite well, but it doesn't work for other people,
really
so I don't know what to tell others.
Work when politicians say it.
No.
Like when Mnuchin says, the economy, get over it, and what? No, that's really not the thing to say.
And it comes off as rather callous when I don't want them to be in this situation. I want them to be able to see through it, but it comes off as incredibly callous and rude.
You can't until you get them out of it. When they're in it, it's really hard to see. So we need to take that first step of waking up before they hear it. So we have to change their attitude about things or change the focus, and we do that through the practice of mudita. You have to get your joy transmitted to them enough so they're not feeling bad about whatever it was. Because if you talk about them feeling bad while they're feeling bad, they won't like it at all. That's happened even to me.
Right.
And the example is that I talk about everybody with becoming a winner and joy and coming out of being a victim, coming out of being a loser. And as soon as I use that word loser, this lady clammed right up. She got huffy. And she says, I'm not a loser.
I mean, but right at that moment, she totally was. Otherwise, she wouldn't be. See, this is the issue, is that in my mind, there's that bit of me that, is saying that, well, yes, you're obviously a loser. You're obviously dumb right now. Because that's what I'll just tell myself in my head. I'll be like, why am I mad? This is so stupid. This is so idiotic that I am mad right now. There's nothing stupider than being mad. And that works quite well in my own head. It just doesn't work as soon as it comes out of my tongue when I'll say, oh, that's dumb. Who likes being mad? That's silly. And then, yeah, it doesn't go over well.
But the only way that you can get a person out of being mad is not by accusing them of being mad, but it's teasing them to come out of it. An example would be that I would use here at home, but you can use this in general, is, well, really, all I want is a smile. Come on, give me a little smile. Are you sure you don't have a smile? Oh, wait a minute, I see you smiling. Kitty's turning around and looking at me because she knows I played this game with her before. I see you smiling. Now you're smiling at me. Okay, so if you do that little sequence with someone who's angry, just getting that crack of a smile out of them is a change in their behavior, change in their attitude.
I've tried doing that before. You suggested that, and at least with my wife, it backfires.
You're not playing it long enough or pleased enough. Yeah, if it backfired, then you hold your head down and say, "Oh no, it backfired. How in the world can I get this lady to smile at me?" And so you can play it up a little bit, but you always work towards the goal is to get them to smile. And sometimes, in fact, when they're really angry, it'll take 10 minutes. Especially a Thai woman. When a Thai woman gets really pissed off, they're really hard to get out of it. I think you know that already.
I was listening to a Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talk that BAA released via their YouTube channel the other day about anger, and he commented on how people really just love to be angry in a way.
Uh-huh.
Because once you get that anger, you just really, your mind is just so inclined to wanting to be even more angry than before.
Uh-huh.
And if you have a bit of sense to you, you'll realize that you don't actually want that at all, that's only going to make things worse. But in the moment, the mind, when it's inclined to anger, it's very easy to go in that direction.
Right. Okay, so that anger actually gives people a false sense of power. If I'm really angry at somebody, that means I'm willing to do something about it to get my way, to get them to do what I want them to do or to say what I want them to say. And so we get a sense of power there, and that sense of power is quite delicious for people. And so some people are very quick to anger because, for one thing, their fear, because all anger comes out of fear. And the anger is actually a suppression of the fear. If I feel really angry, that means I feel powerful enough to defend myself against that which I'm afraid of. Where in our society, mostly what we're afraid of is being insulted in language that very rarely are we ever just out of the blue physically attacked. It's almost
I don't
always
get
verbal.
jumped very often.
And so, but also people, especially if they're close to you, like your wife, though her anger gives her power, deeper inside, everyone knows that anger is generally destructive.
Right.
And that she's better off being not angry at you. You can even tease her with the point of, hey, you'll probably get what you want after you stop being angry. If you stop being angry now, I'll give you whatever you want. And so I get really playful with them. It does. It works. I've seen it work over and over and over again right here on the floor of this house.
But what about when it's not anger? I'd say anger in some ways is almost the easiest one to deal with because for the most part, it's an emotion that passes through fairly quickly. Like people don't generally get mad and stay mad for days and days and days. Most of the time people get mad and then it calms down, and if they're online, then they're going to get mad again and calm down and again. But if they aren't doing something to keep provoking it, it goes away somewhat quickly on its own. But what about when it's these other sorts of things, when people are having problems with other people in their life, whether it's their mom or their dad or their niece or their younger brother or their child or whatever?
I think we've talked a bit about this before, that there is some differences between the Thai and the Western culture, and I think that this is one of the places where we can look at that. That Thai people tend to have a conflict avoidance. But by avoiding the conflict, it's never resolved, but the conflict will stay in the mind.
Yeah.
If they would resolve the conflict, then they could get it out of their mind. So it keeps coming back and robbing them of their joy of the present moment because it's an unresolved conflict.
I mean, it's just like people who are working for a terrible boss. Like, until you have really good mastery over your mind, you're bound to get into all sorts of suffering every time you go to work. And at some point, the best option probably is just to get a different job. But you can't tell people just to get a different family. It certainly doesn't work in Thailand. It doesn't really work anywhere, but certainly not here. was like, well, maybe you just need to spend less time around your mom or your dad or your child or your this, that, or the other.
Well, another one would be, instead of spending the unquality time that you are with them, start spending quality time. And then you can go back to this present moment. Listen, if you could enjoy me and be happy and joyful with me right now, then you can go off and be happy and joyful with your mom too.
That might be a good suggestion for some of these people's concerns. There are a few of them that I think that really the only possible resolution is a certain sort of separation has to occur.
That's very common.
I know of, for instance, I've got a friend who's in a very, very bad marriage. Very, very bad marriage, very bad situation, and
let us not say that it's bad in general or a big bad. Let's just say that there's a lot of moments that are bad, that they have bad often.
I mean, when it's physically and emotionally abusive regularly, yeah. Regularly bad. Lots of bad moments.
An abusive situation in Thailand is unusual.
Oh, no, it's not. People talking about it is unusual, but it actually occurring is not.
That's true. That's true. But I was thinking in the sense that if a woman is abused, she will tell her mother, and her mother will tell the mother of or the mother-in-law, and that the old ladies will take care of the situation. But if the daughter is not telling her mom what's going on, then the problem will never cease. And that many girls are afraid of telling their mother, in the sense of somehow that she has failed because she's the object of someone's abuse.
Well, I think that traditional model works well when the marriages are within closer borders.
Right. They got to be in the same village. You're right. If they're all someplace, one's in Bangkok and the other's in Timbuktu, that's not so easy to do.
The ones that I know of were a bit of that, where I know of one where the parents did know each other. That one ended in divorce, thankfully. It just continued to be bad for many, many years. But some of the more recent ones that I've seen are cases where I know that they come from different provinces or very different parts of the same province. So the parents don't know each other. Maybe they showed up together for a ceremony or whatever, but there's no sort of recourse through elders, and then you get people that sometimes what'll happen is the parents don't want to believe.
What you're pointing out is the breakdown of traditional Thai society. And this is how it's done, is because things become distant that used to be close.
Right. And when society becomes distant like that, you need to have new norms to have a functional society. I think the West has developed a lot of norms that solve some of these problems. They create other problems too.
Most of them are dysfunctional, though.
I don't know. Some are, some aren't.
Like divorce. Divorce is dysfunctional in the West, especially in the United States. But it was the solution for an even more dysfunctional situation.
Yeah, I mean, all of these cases, say, of domestic violence that I know about, I would say that divorce is really the only good option out there. It's not a great thing, but
but here's a way of looking at that now. And that divorce doesn't have to be a big, permanent, long-term with law kind of divorce. It could be the divorce in the moment, in the sense of the girl who is, let us say, finds herself in the house with the angry boyfriend or the angry husband, is to get out of the house, to leave, to walk out. And if she comes back and he's still angry, she leaves again. That would be very Buddhist. That's the way that the Buddha would handle it. There's many different examples of that. So instead of looking for a big answer to what seems to be a big problem, we began to talk about it in the sense of what's the little example for actually this problem in the moment. And I know that it's hard for you and many others to wrap their head around that, but it doesn't matter what the history between these two people are. Right now, he's angry and about to become violent. So right now, she should take a hike.
But at some point, the answer is to take a hike and not come back when you come back to the same issue,
If
right?
it keeps happening over and over and over again, maybe to take a hike and stay away for a couple of days and come back and be slow about that permanency.
I mean, all the ones that I'm thinking of, that sort of thing had already happened. It was
Over and
beyond
over
that
again,
stage.
every time he gets angry, she's gone for 2 days. Slow learners. Of course, in the model that I'm bringing about, she's got a home to go to for a
Yes.
couple of days. And that may not be the case.
One of these, that was not the case. Another one of these, that is the case. But he was incredibly manipulative and set her parents against her. So it's hard to go home and say, he hits me when he's been sweet talking the parents and giving them money and winning them over. And so when she comes home and says, he's a bad husband, they say, no, he's a great guy. What's your problem?
You go stay with him and find out.
Yeah, you try telling your parents in Thailand that.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm laughing. I'm kind of, no, I know. I'm just joking at that one.
But it is an issue. It's something that I've seen a lot of people that get into these kinds of situations, that it is just this recurring, ongoing, pernicious thing that really can.
How many of these situations do you find yourself in right now?
Personally, I don't have any of these. I have no problems. But
No,
other
I'm not
people that
talking
I
about
know,
you inside your family. I'm talking about you knowing about fighting couples that are fighting right now.
I can think of 5 off of the top of my head.
Hubba, hubba.
Yeah, I can think of 5 off the top of my head, and I don't get out and talk to a lot of people. But
What would it be like to invite all of these 10 people to supper some night?
it would be a disaster. It wouldn't be possible because of travel restrictions. Some of these are not local.
Okay.
And not all of these are married couples. I've been using some married coupled examples, but other ones are issues with parents and children or other relationships.
Well,
in any case, these things tend to come in pairs. And I
for
have a bit of the same.
someone to actually cure themselves of these kind of situations is going to take one or the other of the people in that duo to have the same kind of mental training that you've been going through. And that's not going to be an easy thing to happen. Basically, what we can do is for you to back off when you're trying to save the world. You're not going to be able to do that. But what
I don't necessarily want to save the world. I just wish that I
Well,
could give them some advice besides, you're in a terrible situation. You need to get a break from this situation. I don't necessarily recommend a permanent break in any of these cases, but in all of them, it feels like at least a few days or a few weeks would be a good period for both parties to sort of think about things and maybe look at it with a bit of a fresh perspective. But in a lot of the cases, it's not logistically possible because of work or living situations or family situation where actually doing that would be very difficult.
Well, there's not going to be any easy answers, and that it's going to be kind of hard to get any one of these 10 people's attention long enough to even tell them the Dhamma that they should put in practice for themselves. So the only real point to go for is what happens when you are in front of one of these people. In other words, when it's part of your here now and it's part of their here now, you can deal with them in that here now. And that's the way to do it. Cheer them up. Bring them out of their suffering and misery with your own mudita, as opposed to jumping into it. And basically what I hear you doing right now is you're in it.
Sort of, I guess.
Yeah, you're in it. Almost as if you've given yourself a task that's impossible for you to take care of. You've got one mind to fix, and that's a tremendous challenge.
Well, why do you think that I live in seclusion? Because I realize that there are all sorts of troubles and issues, and I really love in the Metta Sutta where it says that monks are toไม่คุกคีในตระกูลทั้งหลาย to not get involved in all the families. That's part of why I live how I do, because I don't have to be involved with the neighbors and the other people and this and that, and I stay away from them.
You can not only quote Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, you can quote him in Thai about what I was about to say.
This is the Buddha. This is from the suttas.
Okay, sorry about that. But it's still the point. The point is, why should you be involved with these family squabbles when you really can't fix it?
I can't. I just wonder if there's any way that I can give them a bit of Dhamma when the opportunity presents and they ask for.
Maybe they don't
advice.
even have to ask for your smile.
Oh, they'll get a smile.
Okay. So if you can get a smile back out of them, now you're making progress.
I wish that all of them could see the peril in the way that they're living their life, and that it's not heedful, and that they should be more heedful and get some more seclusion. They need to get out of these situations and observe their mind instead.
You're right. In fact, I can see more and more of why seclusion is so valuable is because, like these people that you're involved with, each one of them cannot see that the problem is actually inside each one's own individual mind. Every one of them thinks that the problem is the other. He beats me, therefore he's bad, he's wrong, and poor little me.
And what I would love to see in that situation is, they say, I'm going to take the power back and I'm going to walk out and say, nope, you don't get to set the rules here. And that particularly when there's that element of physical danger, that you say, nope, I'm just going to walk on out of this and take that control and not stay a victim. That's very hard for people to do. Very, very difficult. People seem to...
You're still looking at it from the long-term issue. You're trying to solve something permanently. They can only be solved one moment at a time.
Well, yes and no. What I wish is that they could, at that moment, actually have the clarity to do that action. This is not a... I don't prescribe this as this is what has to happen for all time, but people are stuck in these situations and they can't get out of it. And whether you want to see that as literally walking out of the door from mommy or daddy or husband or wife or aunt or uncle or whatever else it may be, and into something else, or whether it's just mentally, it doesn't really make a difference. It's the same discussion.
All right. Well, given that you cannot be there on site during that time when they're fighting with each other, that in fact almost all fights happen behind closed doors.
Yes.
Okay. So you're not likely going to be there, but you're still wanting to find some way of giving or having an influence upon that time when you're not even going to be there. So here's how we can bring that about. And that is just what we've been talking about before with that article that wound up in Lion's Roar by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, in the sense of choices. So one of the ways that you can handle this is by when you find a young woman who is complaining about being beat up by her husband, and for her family is on his side, etc., like that. What your approach would be is ask her to make a list of good choices. In fact, she can make two lists: a list of bad choices and a list of good choices. But you can begin with it just by putting down, well, what are your choices? And now we can start categorizing them of what's the right thing for her to do. So that when you leave her in that conversation, you'll leave her with the ability to look at the fact that she's got choices with you about this. She may, in fact, come up with another choice while she's in the heat of it. But at least, even if she doesn't come up with a new choice, at least now you and she have mapped out a few good choices that she could make. And one of them is getting out of the house, taking a hike.
That is, I have to say, it feels like that's almost always the right choice. I think this is why the Buddha usually got people started by ordaining, saying, you've got to leave your house.
You've got to get out.
You've got to get out of whatever attachments you're in, whatever broken relationships you're in. You need to get out of that and get into something new. And we've got the Sangha for that.
Okay. I agree 100%. And not only that, but I can give you whole bunches of examples in the other part of the world. All right. Let's look at this one: military. When a man joins the military, he has to leave his home and go to the military and go through boot camp, where they depersonalize him by ordering him around and making him feel really bad at whatever. And that's part of the boot camp system. Okay, another one. I've seen psychologists actually recommend that young people get away from their family because you're not making any progress. This actually happens quite often in family therapy, where the teenager is the identified bad kid here, and the therapist recommends that, well, can he go spend the summer with his grandmother or something? So that everybody is good getting the kid out of the house. Here's another example. When people ordain in any religious order, the full ordination is always including room and board to get the kid away from it all.
And I mean, that's, I think, why retreats as a way to learn meditation is such a effective tool,
next item on my list.
Because you've got to get the potential student. It's incredibly hard to get people to start meditating and to understand things at the rate that things go if you're just at home. Because if you don't see how it benefits things, you're not going to have the motivation to do more than a few minutes of it, for the most case. It's so hard to actually get any traction. It can take years. as well. One 10-day boot camp is often enough to kick at least some people into gear. It doesn't work for everyone, but it's far more effective than just trying to get them to do it at their house.
Especially if somebody has already started a personal practice, then doing the retreat really helps. People doing a retreat just absolute cold first time they've ever sat down was in the retreat. I can't expect a lot of good to happen.
No, I don't either.
But if somebody has already been practicing and they know why they're being deprived of all of this stuff so that they can actually deal with the mind, please do. Instead of planning on your escape. How can I get my passport back and get out of here? So, yes, but retreats is an example of getting away from it. The question would be, in the sense of the 10-day retreat, okay, a 10-day retreat from the abusive husband. Is he going to be abusive when the lady comes back out of the retreat? So that may be something that you can arrange for her. Instead of 2 days, you can get her into a retreat. That may really start to break up the patterns that they have.
One thing we did for a friend a while back is she'd lost a child, and so we invited her, and she took us up on it to come up here and spend a few weeks up here just to get out of where she was. Just to sometimes that distance, taking a step back, gives you a chance to actually start to look at things with whatever wisdom you have. It's rather hard to do any work when you're tied up in one of these problems.
Mm-hmm. So this idea of seclusion or getting away from bad environments is good advice if it's timely or if it's the right time for it. But I would also always go for giving that a go several times before we make a big change as a divorce. That divorce tends to destroy the lives of the children, for one thing.
Oh,
it
yeah.
really messes everything else up for the folks. So if someone asks me the question, the answer is, hey, if you can't get along with her, that just means you can't get along. That the problem is not the marriage. Always the problem is the person in the marriage on either side. And so divorce, I don't think, is a good solution to any problem. That if there's any distancing done, it should always be in the thought of temporary or not a permanent getting out of here with bad feeling mentality. So back to that point, still going to be able to do everything in the current moment. So the first thing is they're not going to be able to make a list if they're still really upset about whatever it is. They're only going to be able to make a list of possible choices once you've gotten them out of that feeling and into a state of gladness, or at least a little bit of joy, at least a little bit of you. Right now, at least he's gone. Right now, you don't have to deal with him. Right now, he's not here. If he's here, he's only here in your mind. And so getting your friend out of it in this present moment and getting them into a state of joy, then the second part would be is to get them to make a list of things that they could do that would be wholesome. Because that may show that what they have been doing was unwholesome and kept it going. And fact, normally guys don't just beat and beat and beat their wives. Normally they're at least doing a little bit of self-protection that the wife is beating back. And if you can get her to have new choices about how she's going to deal with her violent husband, she may in fact get him to the point to where he's not violent because he's not having to protect himself from her. So in that regard, if she can become fearless, then she can treat him in a way that she's not afraid of him, so that she's not going to challenge him so that he's afraid enough that he's got to hit her.
I mean, usually in these cases, alcohol's involved.
Uh-huh. So that could be a clue. She could say, all right, I'm going to stay with you, but no alcohol in the house. And if he leaves or if he brings alcohol home and goes away and leaves it, when he comes back, it's gone. And so she can start having that as a rule. I mean, Thai ladies, they are the bosses of their own homes. So that would be the first law that she could. That would be possibly a good, strong first move is no alcohol in the house, because every time you get drunk, you get violent.
Speaking of alcohol,
mm-hmm.
This is an aside. Back to good old Thai politics. The current administration, I heard the other day that they are going to, not only did they forbid sales of alcohol last month around Thai New Year's, but I hear that the same policy is going to be in effect for all of Pansa.
Wow.
That's a interesting move, isn't it?
Yes. I'm not sure it'll work, and I'm not sure that I agree with it or not, but it's certainly a bold move.
I fully agree. I don't know if it'll really work or what they expect to have happen, but it sure is interesting to have a 3-month prohibition in Thailand.
Well, this will give this lady that you're talking about an opportunity to see how alcohol oriented it really is. If he's got to be dry for 3 months, how violent is he going to be? So this is, anyway, I've fairly covered all that I really have to say about it. Is she's got to get out of the bad feelings that you find her in, and you can tease her or use mudita, but get her out of those feelings. Like, tell him, well, he's not here right now. Why are you feeling the way that you feel around him when you're not around him? That you're around me now. Feel the way that I feel. You can say it like that. But get her attention away from how bad she feels. And once she does, or whoever it is, now you can look at what choices that she has. Whether the choice is conflict avoidance, like leaving the place, or conflict like resolution, like making a deal so that we can get beyond this argument that she's having. That'll be more than likely what will happen between a parent and a child, is that they can come to some resolution. Normally, parent to child relationships don't involve violence.
No. Usually not. I've only seen a few examples in my life where I know that violence was actually an issue. That's quite rare.
Getting them to make choices, okay? But now let's go to something else, which is actually quite valuable in this, and that is the resolution of the situation between truth and right speech versus going along to get along, and or confronting people. Like an example would be, you've heard me say this before about the Christian verse, ye shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free, but first it's going to piss you off,
Yes.
right? So if you start teaching Dhamma before the person's ready for it, you will in fact piss them off, giving them something, an unwelcome gift. So we have to be careful about how we teach the Dhamma, because we can piss them off. And we've got really good examples of nobles getting pissing people off due to timing. Socrates, for instance, was trying to get the youth of Athens to not join the army. And he got hemlocked for that.
Yeah.
But Jesus also, I mean, he was quite right to run the money changers out of the temple, but they nailed him for it. So we have to balance this issue of the truth versus the dangers that we have in telling the truth. And there's a little bit of this issue that you'll have to deal with each individual. You have to get them into a good mood, to get them receptive to what you have to say. And sometimes we don't always get all the clues. Because people will get upset if you tell them the truth. They don't like it.
No.
What do you mean it's my fault that my husband beats me? You say that at the wrong time to somebody, you're not going to help them at all.
Yes, even if the point is, I mean, you're still choosing to be with him, so you have a husband that beats you. This is
right.
You can blame it on him.
I mean, that is just so plain. That is so plain. Of course it's her fault. She keeps going back home to this guy knowing what's going on. So that's the first point right there. Of course it's her fault. Everything. But now let's get her home. And what is she saying and doing the minute before he hits her? If she knows where his buttons are, if she don't, she's pretty stupid. But more than likely, she knows where his buttons are, so she could push them, not so she can avoid them. That she's an active participant in getting beaten. And that is really, really hard to hear. But at a very deep level, it's the truth. It takes two people to tango.
That can be true. In some of the other ones where it's not, say, physical violence, I do know that the yelling and berating and stuff comes completely unprovoked. There's one party that
always has to do with the question of who's the boss here, who's in charge of this situation. They're fighting over territorial rights. They're fighting over who's the nest manager, who's the alpha, and that happens especially between young men and their fathers, especially in the West. Not so much of an issue here in Asia, because Mama runs the house, not Daddy. But in fact, that may be part of the issue that you and I have talked, I think, about this before, that now that I let Tam be the boss here, everything runs so beautifully. That this is a matriarchal country. And I've seen people post on the internet that, oh, I've been in Thailand for 20 years, and boy, do I know Thai culture. And man, you got to watch out for these Thai women. They're really terrible, you know. And what's going on is he hasn't realized that he's in a culture clash. He thinks that he could come into Thailand and live in Thailand the way that he would live in the United States, without recognizing in Thailand, the women run the show at home. And I pointed that out to you. I think, in fact, I remember you at the house you used to live in, that you had an old woman, and that all you had to do is change the attitude, your own attitude, that, hey, this lady is the boss of this neighborhood. And when you change your attitude about that, you got along with her fine.
Actually, that one neighbor continued to glare at me and be rude consistently, no
Well,
matter
that's
how
her
much I smiled
job.
at her. After years of that, she still
That,
was just an angry old lady.
yes, that was her job, though, especially since you'd already crossed her before in the past and she couldn't get over it.
Well, she couldn't
But
get
it's
over
not
that she
her
did things
job
that
to
were
get
illegal.
over it. It's your job to get over it. It's your acceptance of her power rather than your defiance of her power that's the real change that needs to be done. She already knows she's got the power. How dare you challenge her? And when you do that with your wife, now you'll make real progress. She's the boss. Did I tell you that Nasruddin story?
I'm not sure. If you start
The
telling
Nas-
it,
yeah, the Nasruddin story. Mullah Nasruddin. The guys in the neighborhood were asking him um, about what does he do to spend his time, and he says, "Oh, well, all of the household duties and where we live and what car we have and the clothes I wear and what the kids do and all of that kind of stuff. That's my wife's business. She takes care of all the little things." And they said, well, what do you do? And he says, oh, I only take care of really, really big things, like is there a God, or how to be happy, or what's the meaning of all of this? You know, well, it's Muslim, so you can imagine that that's what they think are the really big things. So you can start spending your life doing only really big things. And if this guy who was beating his wife would start taking care of only the big things and let her alone, she'd probably be able to manage the house a whole lot better with not getting beat.
yes, she would. Everything would be a lot better in that situation.
And so, in fact, what you're saying is this guy who is Thai has not figured out how to be Thai.
Certainly, it doesn't know how to behave himself.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Well,
you focused on that example. I think I'd given a number of different ones. So suppose we switch this to, say, the case of one of these children versus parent conflicts.
mm-hmm. In that regard, it would be for the whoever you're talking to figure out what the family structure should look like in a well-running family. That would be the kind of choice. And so then the question would be, well, how can you now fit into a well-functioning, well-run family? Normally, you want it in Thailand for that the manager of that well-run family to be one of the older females, the matriarch. Or if not one of the older ones, then let us say one of the smart ones, one of the ones who is a business lady, or has married a man who supports her in being a strong Thai lady. And so this would be the way that I would look at a Thai family, would be that there would be a matriarch there. And so if the child, then let us say it's the son arguing with his father, is for him to recognize, wait a minute, your argument is not with your father, your argument is actually with your grandmother. Except that it's not an argument you want to have with her, that you want to give her the respect that she deserves and needs. And so changing the frame of reference or the focus So it's either going to be the husband who's going to have to give in to his wife, or it's going to be one of the kids that has to change their focus so that they can respect their mom. And that's especially an issue when mom wants them to do something and they want to go do something else.
Well, it's especially an issue when mom wants to do something that is not in anyone's best interest.
Yes.
The case where the mom has a stupid request that's harmful for their child and even for the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And the child who has the wisdom to say, this is not a good thing that I'm being told to do. I've seen it when they defy that, trouble happens, and when they comply with it, trouble happens. It's kind of a catch 22.
Either way, there's going to be trouble.
They go along with mom, and then this bad things happen from the thing that they did. And sometimes the parents are so insane as to then blame the child for the thing that the parents themselves picked, or they go against their parents and the parents get mad that their child is such a stubborn, unhelpful child, and the child just is refusing to do something that's going to harm everyone.
So then you're going towards the solution then is that it's the same. Even if mom's making a bad decision or a bad choice, that bad choice may in fact it can modify or change before too much disaster. But if the child is defying the mother for doing the wrong thing, right now we've got a disaster in this moment. But if the child can be good friends with mom, then he might be able to then point out to mom that what she is about to do is going to be a disaster. But so long as he's defying her, that's back to that point of you shall hear the truth will set you free, but she's getting really pissed off with what she's hearing right now.
I see. I think it's interesting that you take that position, because I would take the other one, simply because that I've seen these situations arise and persist for years, because the one decides that they're going to continue to do the less than optimal choice to keep the peace, and trouble just keeps accruing continuously and nothing ever gets fixed.
That's because they're still against their mom, but they're doing it surreptitiously, sneakily, and not doing it honestly. No, I'm actually talking about an actual change of attitude, that it's okay that my mom screws up.
No, what I'm talking about is, what do you do when mom wants you to do something that's just genuinely not in anyone's best interest? What is the child supposed to do when mom is insisting that they do something that is a bad idea? When mom says, you're going to learn to be an electrical engineer, even though the child hates mathematics, has no interest in the field, and has no abilities there.
That's a strange one.
I see these every day. I see these every day in Thailand. This is what always happens in Thai families, is these situations arise, where the parents or someone else who has the cultural authority makes decisions for other people and says, you should do this. And then the one in lesser is in serious trouble because their elders don't have the wisdom to be an elder, but they have the cultural power to be. And so if they defy it, then they get branded as a troublemaker. And if they go along with it, then they're ruining their own life.
There's got to be a middle path. There's got to be. Somewhere in there's got to be a middle path so that the guy can still be friends with his mother or his elders and still do what he wants to do. And it has to do a lot with his attitude. If he's defiant, it's not going to work.
No, I mean, defiance never fixes these. But I see so many people that go with the compliance route, and then they're stuck in a dead-end job, a miserable marriage, chronically poor. They can never have any money and never have enough to take care of their needs or their children's needs because the parents are always insisting that they give them money or whatever else it may be. I see people that are just stuck in these horrible, horrible situations because they just continue to comply with what is just a bad request.
Right. In some cases, there's not a win-win situation for the situation. The only win-win or the only win can be, for instance, the young man, let's use this as an example. He winds up being a mediocre engineer, but he enjoys it. And in fact, many people who graduate in engineering and are mediocre at engineering go off and do other things anyway. And I can give you many examples of that. Possibly the one that's so strange is, gosh, what was his name? Oppenheimer, but it wasn't the one in nuclear physics. It was the one who was running Occidental Petroleum, but his degree was that he was a medical doctor. And this kind of thing, you know, cross professions, people will get a degree in one thing and then go off and do something completely different. A computer scientist can wind up being a monk.
That works for some things, but
it works for some things, right? So
it doesn't always work for others, right? When you want to be something that requires training, and then you get training for the wrong thing, and then, you know.
But training is training. And once you've gotten trained and you've gotten a degree, that degree can be of enormous value. Having a master's in electrical engineering was a shoe-in to get into a PhD program in psychotherapy. That master's degree was what they wanted. They want the money and they want the student as long as you've got the right credentials, even if it's just numbers or letters behind your name. If you've got that master's degree, you can get into any PhD program you want. And you don't even need a PhD. You can get into any profession that you want. I had a wide variety of different things that I could do, from going into network, going into database, going into design, business models. And when you're getting into design and business models, you're already in the sales department. You're already into marketing. And so there's a lot of fluidity. And yet I can hear that young people, they don't know that. They say, well, I want to go do this. And mom says, she wants you to go do that. And the kid can't see that, well, maybe he can put both together. Maybe he can be friends with his mom and still do what he wants to do.
Or, you know, in said example, since this isn't a present one, this is a past one, they get the electrician's license, hate it, aren't good at it, barely passed anything, can't get a job in it. They always wanted to be a teacher. They go to be a teacher and they can't be a teacher because they don't have the degree in it. So either you go back to school and do a completely new degree, or you just are locked out of what you're actually good at.
While that's actually the written rule you find in the United States, still, if you've got a master's degree, you can teach in any university or any college. If he only got an electrician's license, that's not really good enough to teach.
Well, but that's what mom wanted. That's the degree. So you have to understand, part of this is, one, my wife knows a lot of people, so I end up meeting a lot of people, even though I didn't want to. Two, I used to work with a group that did a lot of people with mental illness, so I actually don't like Thai society because I've seen how it's caused literally hundreds of people that I've personally met. I've seen how Thai societal norms have made them extremely mentally ill. These kinds of the ways that the Thai families, I find that that's a very dysfunctional thing, and it requires all the parties to have a fair amount of wisdom for it to work. I think it's a great model in theory. In practice, I've just seen that it usually ruins people.
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you know of a functioning society anywhere among humans?
No. But that's why I just think it's funny that you're championing this Thai model in a way when I say I think that the Thai
No,
family
it's
model
because
is
we're in
extremely broken.
Thailand that I'm using the Thai model.
It's very broken.
Yes.
But you know,
But
you look at the American model, and it works. It doesn't have any of these problems that we're talking about with the Thai model. But then you end up with
it
people
has
getting a
a
different
range
kind of
of other problems, right? Yeah.
different problems. You get these sorts of isolation and no one to rely on, and all sorts of other things there. But you don't ever, you know, say find yourself with an electrician's license going, but I can't do math. Like, I barely passed any of my courses, and that was just because the professors were kind.
You know, something I wanted to go back and hit on that. It's not that someone's not good at math, is that they think that they are not good at math. If he changes
Yes.
his attitude to I am good at math, then he will be good at math.
But you and I have done enough math to know that not everyone can get to certain levels of mathematics. I taught
Well,
math. It was really
they don't
enjoyable,
because
but
they don't like it.
I
So
don't think
I've
it's
gone
fair.
back to the research of why did I like math, and I traced
Uh-huh.
it down to a second grade teacher. That I liked math because she gave me high marks on the arithmetic that I was doing in the second grade. My attitude that led to being able to do the kind of math that I was able to do. And by the way, I never felt really adequate at it. I
I
never
mean,
did feel adequate at math, but I didn't have to because I already had enough math to do computer science. But a theoretical mathematician, I didn't have much interest in that. But I did have enough interest in it to get a hold of numerical calculus and numerical analysis and um, um, matrix calculus, some of that really weird stuff that's so useful, and also how to actually do integral and differential calculus on the computer in very, very tight little routines. Once you understand what you're doing, it's like only 2 lines of code, and one of those is your loop. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. But
oh,
that's
I
because I had the attitude that it was fun. Other people have the attitude of this is too much work. This is hard to do. People have the same attitude about what they refer to, and sometimes I'm forced to use the word meditation. Some
I
people
agree that the
good at
attitude
like it.
matters.
Hmm?
I agree that attitude matters considerably. That when I taught students in university mathematics, that there were ones who'd previously, you know, they'd failed the course a few times, and then if I could encourage them and get their attitude, that most of them could, almost all of the ones that could change their attitude would start to do much better, and then they ended up passing. But there is an element of, it's not that everyone has the same skill level. Not everyone has a theoretical mathematician in them. I know lots of people that loved math. I use math as an example because that's what I got a degree in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had peers that loved math, and they weren't that great at it. They just simply don't have the capacity to be a theoretical mathematician despite their love for it. And that's fine. You know, I like music, but I'm terrible at performing it. I mean, I've tried and I enjoy the practice of it, but at the end of the day, I know that I'm not a
Right.
concert musician, and I simply don't have the raw talent to be one, despite the fact that I have a pretty good attitude about it. When I'm practicing, I feel pretty good about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I can realize that whatever the wisdom I have is enough to tell me that I simply don't have that raw talent. Anyways, we're on a
Right.
bit of a tangent from these sorts of questions
Right.
of
But
personal
no, we're
problems.
actually back on part of the issue is that sometimes mom wants him to be an engineer because she's got a reason for it. And instead of looking at what mom's reason is, and you know, by the way, being an electrician does not take very much math.
No, it doesn't. In this
It
case, it's
being a
someone that I
mess,
know is
right?
genuinely just doesn't like the subject, and because it, you know how the math
Right.
People not being good at math generally just comes from poor experience and in grade school that leads them to dislike it. And that becomes self-defeating. It's a big problem in mathematics.
Normally with electrical electrician kind of stuff, it's a lot of rules or a lot of code to make sure that the equipment will handle the load. So the electrician doesn't have to do any of the load calculation. All they need to know is to what gauge wire is the cheapest one to get the job done. And that winds up being down to standard. So if you want to know what kind of wiring to put into a house, you don't need your calculator. You just go down to the electrician's shop and say, I want a spool of normal house wiring, and off you go. And that all of the ways of, the white and the black, and there's a whole lot of little rules with it. And once you learn that set of rules, now it's all tediously installing wiring. And believe me, it is tedious.
Yes, I wired my house, and my house isn't even that big, and it was tedious. Anyways, my wife called a bit ago. I should probably call her back to see.
All right. Well, I've got my supper here waiting on me. It was cold to begin with, so I'm just letting it sit there. But anyway, let's refresh what we've just talked about, in the sense of when you're with someone, you want to work on what mood they've got right now. Not try to solve their long-term problems right now. Let's get them out of the bad mood they're in. The next one is to help them prepare for next time, is by getting them to think about what are the choices that they would have when they're in such a situation, so that they can think their way through it while they're not in it. And that's the way to do it, so that she can begin to wake up. And the third one would be, if it's possible, is to point out to her that she's a player in this game. And that if she starts to play differently by taking new choices, she'll actually be able to control it somewhat. That she's not out of control. She's not the victim here. And those are the three things. And that would happen not with just one, but that would be in anything, including the kid who wants to be something other than an electrician. That in fact, because he's feeling powerless, he really hates the idea of being an electrician simply because his mom wants him to be one. But he could figure out a way of gaining his own power and then start to manipulate mom back so he can go do what he wants to do. Like, for instance, wiring her house. If she wants her son to be an electrician, why? Maybe she just wants her house wired. So go wire his house. Wire his house. And now he can go off and get his degree in teaching. But it does take a whole lot of giving in to the other one. Let them be the boss. Let's go along with them, rather than we got to do it my way. All right, so go talk to your boss. I'll see you later.
All right, talk to you later. Good talking with you.
That's great. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.